Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, it's my pleasure to open the very important discussion here in the Polish House in Davos. I'm happy that this year our informal Polish representation hosts many events during which we can both promote Poland and Polish priorities, but also to discuss the main challenges we are facing. I hope that the topics raised during today's discussion on NATO's achievements and challenges will be continued soon in Vilnius and that they will be turned into action. 1 year after the Russian aggression against Ukraine, NATO member states are more united than ever, truly focused on NATO's primary task of collective defense and persistent in their support to Ukraine. The war in Ukraine has proven that NATO members are reliable and loyal partners who do not give up their support despite crises. NATO is an irreplaceable element of ensuring security in Europe. Last year, NATO adopted its new strategic concept in which all allies agreed that the Russian Federation is the most significant and direct threat to allies' security and to peace and stability in the Euro-Atlantic area. Now, on the road to the Vilnius Summit, we should make sure that the alliance is fully prepared to face this threat. Nearly a year after the outbreak of the war, we still see new needs and challenges for us as a member states, but also for NATO as a whole. 3 issues are particularly important in that context. First, NATO should implement the new baseline for deterrence and defense as agreed in Madrid. It needs to take into account Russia's increasing political military control over Belarus. NATO-Belarus border needs to be protected the same way as NATO-Russia border. It's very important. Just to remind you about Lukashenko regime's migration crisis on the Polish-Belarusian border shortly before the war. I have no doubts that Russia's attack on sovereign Ukraine has accelerated the need to strengthen NATO's external flanks located on the eastern borders of Central and Eastern European countries. Second, NATO should demonstrate that every nation in Europe has a sovereign right to choose its own security arrangements. We need to finalize the accession of Finland and Sweden. I hope we will be able to welcome them as NATO members as soon as possible. We also need to respond to Ukraine's membership aspiration. Now, it's high time to give Kiev answers on how the accession process should look and what steps are required to guarantee the desirable end result. The support for Ukraine needs to be continued. Third, NATO deterrence and defense should be appropriately resourced in the long term. Therefore, we need to update NATO guidelines on defense spending. The goal of 2% of GDP was agreed in 2014 after the first Russian invasion of Ukraine and was supposed to be met by 2024. This year, Poland will spend more than 4% of its GDP on defense. This is an enormous effort taking into account the current economic situation in Europe and the efforts we are all undertaking to help Ukrainians. But I know that this is an investment in the future and safety of the whole region. We must be prepared for a period of uncertainty in Europe. There is no quick solution to the security crisis on the continent. No, nor should we expect one in the nearest future. We should be ready to reject Russian false proposals regarding the peace negotiations, as they would only consolidate Russian territorial gains in Ukraine. We must not allow Russia to have a sense of victory, as this would mean that its aggression pays off. The war has shown us how valuable cooperation and neighborly assistance are. I'm grateful to all of you who, from the first day of the war, have been involved in helping the Ukrainians. I assure you that Poland will continue to help Ukraine as far as possible. Once again, thank you for this debate, and I'm looking forward to hearing your comments and remarks. Thank you.
Summit, the debate with the representatives of permanent representatives to NATO. Let me now welcome to the stage representative from Poland, Tomasz Szatkowski. Estonia, Yuri Luik. Slovakia, Peter Bator. This fireside chat will be moderated by Henry Foy, European diplomatic correspondent, Financial Times.
I need a chair. Thank you so much. There's no chair for me, of course, because I know my place as a journalist. Thank you, Mr. President, for a very kind opening address, giving us lots to talk about. It's quite daunting. I don't normally provide entertainment for heads of state, so I hope that we'll make that work. Thank you. All right. Well, that's broken the ice. Thanks a lot for coming. You've all survived Davos, and it's very nice of you to go up your final evenings, I think, for most of you to be here. It's a really thrilling topic and a really important one. It's nice to see friends here on stage and people that I'm yet to meet. For those of us, I work in Brussels, so I live and breathe NATO, but I appreciate that not everybody is a NATO nerd. So I wondered, Tomasz, if you could start by giving a little bit of a background in terms of what has been agreed up until Vilnius and where we are in that plan, and really why it matters to ordinary people.
Yeah, thank you much, Henry, and it's a great honor to be here, to be speaking at the panel that was launched by the Keynote of our president, and also with my two distinguished colleagues to whom I'm very grateful that have accepted this invitation, and they are very strong voices in the NAC, and I always can count on their support, and we support each other in a good cause. So it's really good to be here together. But recalling of where we are, because and indeed it's a good starting point, because Vilnius will be either a merely implementing summit, or it will be an important follow-up with important decisions to the Madrid Summit. In this case, Madrid Summit was enormously important because it was the summit where we accepted the strategic concept that was forged in more than 2 years of a work within the alliance. But we also reacted to the aggression of Russia, an aggression that is unprecedented since the Second World War, and hence certain paradigm change. Forward defense has been introduced. This is the concept where basically we say that from now on, our aim is that each inch of the alliance's territory will be defended. Before that, we were saying, okay, I mean, if anything happens, we will react, but then it might takes time. We're kind of in a reactive mode. Now we have the ambition is much higher. Second important development has been that we have said already 2 days after the after Russian aggression, a very important declaration by heads of states and leaders of NATO that Russia walked away from its commitment on the NATO-Russia Founding Act. So basically, we are saying it's no longer a partner. It's still a subject of a debate. I mean, what actually means, but it's a very important statement. So now, with regard to those, we'll see whether Vilnius will be just an implementation of what we have decided in Madrid, what head of states have decided in Madrid, or will it bring new decisions? And I think this is something you will be expecting from my colleagues too.
Yeah, I mean, it was explained to me sort of that before the idea was you try to convince Russia it would be a bad idea to invade, but now you're saying actually we're going to assume that you will at some point, so we're going to make sure the defense is good enough and strong enough, right? I mean, you guys obviously all represent countries on the eastern flank of NATO. Peter, do you think that the forward defense concept has been fully fleshed out and fully understood by the rest of the alliance? Because obviously it's something that was led by countries in your part of Europe, and it's way more important for you than the Portuguese, for example, who, God love them, they're probably not going to be invaded by the Russians.
Yeah, first let me start with thanking Mr. President, but also everyone from on the Polish side that made this happen. I mean, this is quite a marvelous thing. I mean, in that busy city in this time. So thanks for having us here. We would probably be magicians if we said that that we achieved it between Madrid. And basically, we've got January now. So, Madrid was last year in July. So we laid the grounds for it. And as Tomasz said, it's very important to distinguish between what we had before the summit and what we had after the summit. Like before the summit, Tomasz already said it, but I will repeat it. It was if the Allied territory is attacked, then we should have enough capabilities and capacities to come and to defend. There was something else. It was what we called like the security or the insurance policy, which was the forward presence. The forward presence, let's be honest, was not there to defend. We knew it was not capable of defending the territory, but it was
the tripwire concept.
Exactly. It was like if there's 10 nations or 8 nations or 5 nations and someone is killed by illegal action by Russia or whatever, what happened in Crimea basically, then more states will be involved, and then it could trigger much bigger reaction. Now we want to have a setup in which the forces will be able to defend the country from the very first minute. Why? Because now we have learned what happened in Ukraine, that people who were under the Russian oppression, even for 1 week, they got killed, they got raped, and we cannot allow any of our citizens to suffer this. That's why we need to have sufficient forces to be there. We just laid grounds for that. It's been several months. This upcoming summit will be just the first step to see how much we have already achieved, and we are pushing hard to achieve something, because let's be honest, in 2014, Russia invaded Ukraine for the first time. It's 2023. It's been 9 years. In 9 years, Russia succeeded in waging 2 wars against Ukraine, and this is a long time. That's why we need to speed up all the processes and everything. So we are on the way, but we must make sure that we will deliver. Because let me be maybe less diplomatic here.
Please be as undiplomatic as possible.
I don't think what we agreed in Madrid is something that will last for years. This is just, that's why we call it baseline. This is just the very basics. We know that the relations with Russia will not be good. We know there will be sort of a Cold War with Russia. We need to be ready, and we know we will need much more forces on our flank just to be ready to defend.
Pretty bleak, but I guess also quite good that everyone's realizing the threat. Yuri, I've been in Brussels for just over 18 months, and I've been struck by how the war has changed the way people perceive Poland, the Baltics, Slovakia, Eastern countries that for a long time have been saying this needs to be taken more seriously. Do you see the road to Vilnius as a reflection of that louder voice that countries such as the 3 countries represented here now have in Brussels, both in the EU and in NATO? Or do you think more has to be done for Central Western countries to listen and really listen to what you guys are saying?
First, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President, for this marvelous event. Indeed, very important questions to be discussed. You know, people are saying, oh, Balts, Poles, Slovaks, you were right. I mean, you really said it. The Russian state is really aggressive. It might attack. But I'm not sure whether something comes out of it. Right. When there are debates about the future of Ukraine or alliance or what have you, or Russia, people are not saying to us, okay, you said this. Because you were right the last time, I now trust you. Yeah. People are very quickly returning to their initial positions and really develop those kind of extensively. Let me give you a couple of quick examples.
Only if you name names, though.
One is forward defense. Actually, it was very difficult to get this concept through. There were very powerful communities who were against that. There was a community of the military in Western Europe, partly and also in the United States, who said, look, the nature of the war has changed. We now fight in a totally different way. You know, high-tech, long-range, precision. Don't worry about these tanks and you know, APCs. And this is all old stuff. And we said, no, you know, we can see now that it is not old stuff. Tanks are moving in Europe. APCs are moving in Europe. This sort of warrants another approach. And the second point was, you know, Cold War, my friends, is a Cold War term. It means that, you know, big cores are in front, and this cannot be used today because there are no units of that magnitude. And at every moment we had to fight with these arguments. And you know the counter-arguments, so I won't repeat them here. We fought with friends who are sitting here on the table. But the problem is the arguments haven't gotten anywhere. They are not spoken about because the Madrid decisions are different. But you can feel that people try still to find perhaps more practical arguments, right, to speak about smaller units, to speak about various issues we actually sort of discarded before Madrid. So one of our tasks is really to hang on to Madrid decisions and really demand coming through and fulfilling these decisions. And as the President said, this automatically brings us also to defense spending, because the decisions in Madrid are difficult to be fulfilled, if they can be fulfilled at all, without the dramatic raise of defense spending. And today we have two targets, of course, we have to keep in mind. One is providing defensive capabilities to Ukraine, and Estonia has given 1% of its GDP up till now for supporting Ukraine. So these are big sums for a small country. And the other thing is, of course, maintaining our own depots, maintaining our own ammunition, equipment. This is not a small thing, because, you know, you see how Russia fights. I mean, they have volume, they have mass. And if we believe that we can fight it with a couple of precision missiles, then we are wrong. We need mass, we need volume, we need real hands-on capabilities. And this will be a challenge for Vilnius and years after Vilnius.
I can't claim credit for this anecdote because I heard it on a different panel when I was moderating, that this gentleman said, well, the war in Ukraine has really shown that the only military force in the world that has a capable, modern air force and combined arms is NATO, and that NATO could beat Russia any day of the week, except for the 8th day when they'd run out of weapons. And I mean, that's funny, but it's also not funny. It's quite scary. I mean, how much is industrial strategy a key part of the Vilnius, the road to Vilnius, and this forward new structure for NATO? I mean, if we don't have enough factories to build the weapons, we're not going to have enough weapons, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And in NATO, we see the return of the industrial debate, and of course, Poland supports the subject to be discussed and developed within the alliance. We support ideas to pull procurement requirements, to pull contracts together so that we have a scale. But let's be honest. I mean, this is. I mean, more is to be done on the national level. And it's still much to be done on the national level. And first of all, we need a long-term comprehensive planning so that the industry will know in advance how much will be needed. And if this is not the case, like with this crisis, we have to resort to some extraordinary means. Like in the case of Poland, we not only employ more than 100% of the capacity of our industry already, but we also had to make some arrangements with some rather exotic partners, but very interesting ones, like Korea, for example. Yeah, in this case, and with the assistance of Korea, we're also looking to expand our defense industrial capacity at home.
Yeah. Because I mean, obviously, a very live debate right now is the Leopard debate, right? Will Germany allow other countries to export their tanks that were made in Germany to Ukraine? Lots of countries, including Poland, want to do so. If we go through with this whole idea that the EU is proposing, which is like collective buying and countries helping each other make stuff, isn't that a danger that you have a situation in the future where a country like Germany says, no, we helped build this tank, so you can't use it in a certain way? Do we need to go back to individual countries having their own reliable industry for arms? Or can we start to trust NATO partners properly? I mean, the Leopard debate for me seems to show that we can't always trust NATO partners, right? I appreciate that's a horrible question to answer, but please try.
You know, it will always remain national. I mean, to a certain extent. There are three things, and just continue what Tomasz said. Three things that we really need to see and that are not happening. The first one is a true cooperation. What we've been seeing right now is there is some small parts of the cooperation that, okay, we pull the money together and then we can give it to someone, like it happened in Slovakia. 3 states or 4 states merged, you know, the funds, and now Slovakia is producing howitzers for Ukraine. But this is not a true cooperation. You still rely on one production capacity, which is totally exhausted. This is happening all over Europe and partially also in the United States. I don't see for the time being a true cooperation among businesses, just because almost all of those businesses are still protecting their profit, still protecting their technology, still protecting their capacities and everything. They would rather produce less than to open to someone else, to new partnerships that would probably go into the heart of their business. And you know, frankly speaking, this has always been about this, like, to what extent will we be protectionism? Will we have protectionism in Europe? And why the relations between, you know, why we have been receiving so many comments like, why are you buying F-16s, for example? Why are you buying so much from the United States? Why are you buying from there? So the protectionism is still there. And if we do not get rid of this approach, we will not have a true cooperation. Second, it's the procurement. The procurement is really a pain. Now it takes years, but not 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, 10 years. If we want to procure quickly, if we want to deliver quickly to Ukraine, even if we had the production capacities, we need to change this. Because the problem now is that simply if state is involved, it takes for too long. And still now, I mean, we are still living in a time when you say we are going to procure, I don't know, 8x8, then you're facing for 2 years, you're facing just criticism by the public because they always say you're going to steal some money. Every time there is a new contract published by the government, it's always like, who's going to steal the money? And this is the problem that we need to, we need to work up with our publics as well, that when we are procuring fast, it's because we need it so fast, and it's because, we need to give it to someone else or for our own purposes. So that's why, to answer your question, it will always be partially national, and it will always, those countries who would have the decisive stake in the procurement or in the production, they will always keep hands, on it. And this is a political thing. This is not industrial one.
But how do we fix that? Because obviously there are bigger countries that have more factories, and then there are smaller countries which will never have as many factories that maybe need the defense more. Estonia is a great example, right? You're never going to have enough. You're never going to have a fighter jet factory and a tank factory so how do we make sure that you can trust each other when it comes to procurement and supply?
As I said before, it has become a major issue. We are talking to the arms industry and are saying, look, don't you understand? You will have major markets for 15, 20 years. But they are saying, show us the money, show us the agreements. Because if we build a new factory to complement the existing factories, it's a huge investment. And perhaps peace breaks out after 10 years. And people will say, why do we need all these tanks? This has happened already. So the arms industry is, well, understandably, very suspicious. They want to see the money. So we have to put money in play, on the table, before we can expect large-scale, production increases. This is particularly true when companies produce something which is complicated and which is expensive and which needs new equipment, training of engineers, etc., etc. So we have to accept that we haven't found the proper way of inducing the companies to raise the production quickly. The other problem is interoperability. It's a dirty secret, but arms companies have deliberately created weapons which are not necessarily interoperable, because then you buy the equipment, the logistics, the spare parts, everything from one company. If it would all be interchangeable, you might not necessarily do it. And this is a huge challenge today when we see various types of weaponry provided to Ukraine. How do you create the logistical backup for this equipment? On the other hand, again, just to say to arms companies, do this or do that, that's not how business works. That's not how commerce works. If they would trust that we won't be buying stuff which is not properly interoperable, then, they start to think. But it takes a serious, substantial dialogue and a serious commercial dialogue. And then there is an issue which you raised. This is an issue of trust. If I buy equipment, for instance, if I buy something from Poland, I'm not planning at the moment, but if I would...
You're already buying Bjorn manpots.
To be honest, we are already buying. But that aside, when I buy from Poland, I know 100% that I can use it everywhere and anywhere, and it's really mine, and I can make decisions about this equipment. So I trust the equipment working well, but I also trust the fact that Poland will not stop me. If we are talking about the national security issue. So the issue of trust has suddenly risen as a big issue, without going into details, naming countries or anything.
People can fill in the blanks.
Just let me add very quickly. these are the times when the trust is being built, because in the past we didn't have this experience, we didn't have these problems. Now the end users agreements and everything really come in place, and now this is how the trust is built. I mean, if this is going to be refused by anyone, then it would not definitely contribute to the trust. So I mean, now we are creating the trust, now we are creating the rules, now we are creating the world that, or the environment that we will be working with or in for the coming years.
And like you have said in the beginning, I mean, just to sum up, to the extent you can, it's always better. I mean, if you have enough of a capacity, it's always better to go national. If you have if you have to go multinational, there may be some strings attached, and there are some lessons learned that are indeed derived from the current crisis. Leopard case is just one of them. There were more instances where we intended to provide some modern equipment to Ukraine, and there were limitations from the original equipment manufacturer country, and we are implementing those lessons now with the new procurement decisions, with the new contracts that we are signing, which are controversial in some circles on the continent. Let's put it this way.
Does it still surprise the three of you that people are still worried about escalation? People are still somehow obsessed by this idea that if we give a certain weapon to Ukraine, Russia's going to do something crazy. I mean, Russia's doing horrendous things every day, right? I mean, do you three of you understand why it still hasn't sunk in yet with some of your allies?
I've never understood it. I've never understood it, and I think we are making a major mistake by providing arms to Ukraine incrementally, sort of drip, 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 and Ukraine is then not capable necessarily of utilizing the might of its army, which is very professional, and which hopefully could conduct this war and end this war much quicker. So we have to provide the equipment. And I must say, from everything which I have seen in the media, all the weapon system, long-range missiles, even fighter planes, tanks, I don't see anything escalatory there. These are the tools of conventional warfare. Russia has chosen these tools. They have chosen to fight with these tools of conventional warfare. If we want to help Ukraine, the only way to do it is to provide equal, or in our case, better capabilities. Longer range, more precision, I don't know, night vision, what have you. So that's, in a way, it's a simple solution, and I really don't understand why people are speaking about escalation.
I can certainly testify that Yuri is addressing this issue frequently in the North Atlantic Council, and his voice is sometimes difficult to bear for some of those who believe that those notions still exist. Because basically, we should remember that information operations are part of Russian strategy. Russia is trying to convince us that the only, any sort of Ukrainian victory will end up with Russia going nuclear, which I mean, we shouldn't really give in into believing. Like Yuri has said, Russia has chosen certain ways of conducting warfare, for instance, attacking strategic infrastructure, civilian strategic infrastructure. There's no really point, there's no argument why Ukraine shouldn't be allowed to do the same. Russia should bear the cost of their actions and should understand that it's a rational conclusion of their deeds.
I think
otherwise the deterrence doesn't work.
The only escalatory thing that we have been doing is that we have probably not been doing enough, because this is encouraging Russia to do more, because they do not see a seriously resolute answer to that. If we were providing as much as we are providing right now in the beginning of the conflict would look totally different. So I mean, if we say this is going to be escalatory, let's not do anything. This is escalatory, because the only party that has been escalating the conflict was Russia, with us, I mean, and now speaking about NATO, doing very little on the lethal front, nothing. Yeah. And Russia still was escalating and escalating, killing civilians and so on. So, I mean, if we do nothing, then we escalate.
And I believe that we might have missed an important window of opportunity to end this war. actually between August and October, when Ukraine was on the counteroffensive and Russian front was about to crumble. Had we delivered more of the decisive weaponry, Russians may have been almost driven out of Ukraine by now.
But doesn't this come back to, I remember February 24th, going to NATO headquarters, hearing the speeches by Stoltenberg, von der Leyen, blah, 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 whatever, and then going to an intelligence briefing upstairs where I was told this war's going to be over in 5 days. So it's pointless us throwing weapons in because Russia's going to win. It seemed like NATO approached it from the wrong point of view to begin with, and we're just catching up now.
In a way, you're right. In a way, we were given a proper intelligence picture of Russian intent, and in terms of the strategic intent, in terms of how they are going to do it. Probably, we are all mistaken, underestimating Ukrainians and overestimating Russians. But I don't believe this is the actual argument when it comes to the delivery of arms. Maybe in the beginning, but then when we noticed, and we had to acknowledge that Ukrainians are actually competent in terms of defense, and Russians are sort of incompetent. Yeah, we have to say that. Directly, this was more of an issue of the escalation management, and to some extent that I can of course understand. There are large issues at stake. There is the mutual assured destruction, strategic stability, but I'm not convinced that we are drawing this fine line, in the actual place.
I wanted to take a bit of a step back and ask the three of you the same question. I moderated a panel here yesterday with business people and with foreign investors, and the panel agreed that counterintuitively, thanks to the war, Eastern Europe was now safer than it was before the war because of the way allies have responded, because of the way NATO has changed its posture. Do you agree with that? Are Poland, Slovakia and Estonia safer today than they were on February 23rd?
Speaking for Slovakia, look, before the war and before 2014, we were falsely in a very comfortable position. Yeah, because there was big Ukraine between Russia and us. If you read all the classified and unclassified strategies and forecasts, it was always written like the risk of a large-scale conventional conflict was very low. The result of it was that we went from 1.78% investment in our defense to 0.91, which was
Slovakia did.
Yes.
Wow.
Which and just this false
almost
feeling,
as bad as Luxembourg.
Yes. This false feeling of security just almost ruined our defense. Now we jumped from 0.91 to 2%. We are, I think, among the four countries in NATO that percentage-wise, we jumped the most, and we more than doubled our budget. But not only that, there are other things. Not only that we have now, and all of a sudden, only in December before the war, we had thousands of people in the streets protesting against the government because the government decided to sign a bilateral agreement with the United States, Defense Cooperation Agreement, which is a very general one. People wanted to overthrow the government just because of this, because they already saw the nuclear weapons on our streets, and they already saw all our airports sold to the United States, and thousands of U.S. soldiers just marching on the streets. Nothing, of course, of that happened. It totally changed in February. All those people protesting were just silent, and all of a sudden they were welcoming NATO troops. Yeah. This made Slovakia definitely safer, not only in terms of having more troops, not only in terms of investing more into our defense, but also in minds of the people. We jumped from 52% to 78% or 76% support for NATO in 2 months. Wow. This makes my country much safer than it was before. So, and then of course all the concepts now, even the let's call it, it's not a correct description, but let's call it the western part of NATO, is now much more aware of the threats, is now much more looking, at least looking in the east and to the eastern flank, and they need to think about strengthening the capabilities, because now they understand it's not about their forces and on our territory, it's not about their forces and their security or our security, it's about their security, because they understand, I think everyone understands, if there's one day when there is an attack against one of us, on the eastern flank, and no one comes to help us, that's the end of NATO. Yeah. And now they understand it, because now it's real. I mean, now they see that Russia, I mean, we said Russia would never invade Ukraine in a way as they did, because it was stupid, because it was not sustainable, they did not have enough weapons for that, and they did. Why? I mean, and now when they say, okay, but they will not attack NATO, because it's stupid, it's suicide, we already learned the lesson, I think.
Yeah, in a way it's extremely sad, but it's true that this has changed the security posture in the eastern flank. And I mean, NATO is one thing, but largely we have to be grateful to the Ukrainian people, because their fight has actually drastically changed the security situation in the eastern flank of NATO, and has raised the credibility, has shown that the dictators won't win, because if nations are ready to fight back, that is a very strong argument. But also, I mean, it's true that we could have never moved from tripwire approach to forward defense or deterrence by denial, or those old/new terms, which are very much now in use. But it's very important that these commitments are credibly fulfilled, because if at some point it becomes, if at some point there is a feeling that, yes, NATO made these decisions, but they are not properly fulfilled, then of course, again, immediately the deterrent power weakens. At the moment, it's quite strong. Not only because of the weapons, but also because many of the things which European and US leaders said, you know, political strengthening, bringing troops to eastern flank, Finland and Sweden becoming members, etc., 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 they have come to fruition. They have actually happened. And this is something where it has been a strong signal to President Putin that listen to what we are saying. Don't be certain that Western community is weak. And that's very helpful when it comes to nuclear weapons, because many countries have said quite openly, the countries who have actual capabilities, have said, don't do it. Don't play around with nukes. There will be huge problems for your country. And he, in a way, believes that. He has clearly been perhaps even taken aback by the strong Western reaction, and at least he doesn't use or he doesn't play this card, at least not as actively as he used to. I mean, Medvedev occasionally says something funny, but
well, that's 'cause
it's not something which we should
he normally tweets
be worried about.
After 8 p.m. and his third bottle of wine. Poor Dima. Anyway, I agree with you, but I think perhaps Xi Jinping has played a much bigger role in convincing Putin not to use nuclear weapons, given how much he's now relying on China. I wanted to come back there. You talked about credibility. I was at the press conference where Stoltenberg said Finland and Sweden will become members in a matter of weeks. And we're still waiting on Hungary and Turkey. Has that become a credibility issue for NATO? I mean, surely Putin looks at this and says, oh, they can't even agree amongst themselves to add these two countries. And yes, I buy the argument that if Finland was invaded, we would all go to defend them. But surely NATO needs to read the Riot Act to Turkey and Hungary and say this is a credibility issue. You're making us look bad.
Well, absolutely. This will be a credibility issue if Sweden and Finland will not be NATO members at Vilnius. But if they become NATO members at Vilnius, this still is going to be one of the shortest ratification processes in the NATO's history. So we have to have some patience. Of course, we are explaining to our allies, to our friends. We are talking. There are issues that, especially when it comes to Turkey, Sweden, and Finland, requires flexibility on both sides. And we believe this flexibility will eventually be displayed and will bring us to a successful conclusion at the Vilnius Summit. I'm moderately optimistic this is going to be the case. But let me just return, if I may, to the previous issue. Indeed, we have to recognize that the glass is also half full. The months of 2021 and initial months of 2022 will be subject, I believe, of many history book and articles. There were many frustrating moments when we were trying to convince allies that indeed, this is, Russia is about to do something, and we're trying to convince allies that we need to be prepared. I remember numerous initiatives by Mr. President when he was trying to alert also other heads of state to the gravity of the issue, but eventually the morning of the 24th was one of the most positive moments, I have to say, in my NATO experience. It was one of the shortest North Atlantic Council meetings in the at least in my career at NATO, probably the shortest one. I believe one of us started to say something about, that perhaps we were mistaken or something, and one of those who were skeptics said, "Okay, I mean, just spare us. We know what we have to do." And this was the meeting of the council where first time in history we activated operational plans, and Russia was indeed able to recognize this language. There was a massive air operation, massive maritime operation, and we have the privilege to actually watch intelligence briefings, to discuss intelligence briefing, to discuss operational situation, and I can say that Russia understands that NATO is ready to respond. Russia is trying not to provoke NATO. At the same time, Russia understands that NATO is not about to invade Russia. And hence, for instance, they had a comfort to pull out much of their forces from NATO borders, and this is another argument when it comes to the how wrong is the argument about us perhaps escalating and Russia miscalculating our intents.
Yeah, maybe just to say something that almost no one knows about Poland. Poland signed the Article 4 on that morning twice. That's, everyone else signed it just once, but as Poland already had some prepared plans with the Baltic states, but then also there were other allies, namely Romania, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. So Tomasz came over to the Romanian delegation and signed it again. So there are two papers signed by Poland, so it was twice. Article 4 on the, yes, you wanted to stress that you really mean it, and rightly so. But very quickly on the credibility, I think, and I just assume that Putin is not a very strong reader. He doesn't care what we write in our documents. He cares, he can see. I mean, his eyesight is quite strong. So what he really cares about is how many troops we have on the eastern flank, how better we are prepared, how quickly we can react, and whether we can finalize the ratification process, and whether we can start the process of enlargement for Ukraine. This is what he really takes into account, not our papers, not our strategies, whatever they are, however good they are prepared. So I mean, this is, and that's why when we started this discussion about the Vilnius Summit, we don't agree. I mean, and I can speak on behalf of both of them because I already heard them say that implementation summit for the heads of state is not enough for them. I mean, we can do that. It's our job, bureaucrats, ambassadors, just to take stock of the implementation. When the presidents come, when the prime ministers come to the room, they need to take bold decisions, political decisions. They need to bring something back home. When the Polish president sitting here comes back home, what would he say? We are on a good track. That's the main message from NATO Summit. I mean, then if I were a journalist, I would ask, Mr. President, why did you come there? I mean, your ambassador could have briefed you on that. Yeah, I mean, that's not worth you going there. That's why we need to take care of the strategic communication and of the things that are being done by NATO.
Just to add that indeed credibility is an important has important deterrent value, if you will. And one of the credibility issues is also the fact that in Vilnius we should make a strategic leap in moving Ukraine close to NATO. I mean, we made this commitment 14 years ago. Bucharest 2008. We reaffirmed this commitment last year, October, in the Foreign Ministerial. Now we have to show that we take this issue very seriously, because this is about the European security post-conflict. And we cannot allow to send a signal that at some instances, or in some ways, or in some tasks, Putin has won. Because one of his primary objectives was to avoid Ukraine becoming member of NATO, so that you can take a country out of the queue with military force. And the second point, of course, is that, I mean, if we allow, after the war, Ukraine to be given some kind of a special status, or somehow deem it to be, some people are saying, perhaps it should be neutral, but with a lot of weapons, which we provide to them. The hedgehog strategy. But let's be honest, I mean, then it would be a military camp, a fortress. And Ukraine has to rebuild its country. Investors from the West should come and help to rebuild this country. But if Ukraine is in the constant sort of readiness posture, then that doesn't work. That's one of the reasons why NATO was created. It was created to provide countries like Germany, like the rest of Europe, which was devastated by war, the sound framework to develop and to be peaceful.
And to share the burden more evenly. So
and to share the burden more evenly. That's why I believe that we should talk about this issue. And it's not, some people are saying, well, it's too early. I mean, let's win the war. Let's see then. I think that's, again, a wrong approach because, I mean, Atlantic Charter was signed, Roosevelt and Churchill met in 1941, I think. It was very early in the war where they decided that the war should end with democratic countries restoring their sovereignty and independence. It was very early in the war. So it's very important how we see the end of the war. And Ukraine in NATO should be, for me, it's an existential part of that.
I was glad you brought that up. I wanted to ask about this. Isn't the Ukraine debate, the Ukraine membership debate, going to make these discussions over weapons sending and discussions over forward posture look tiny in comparison? I mean, there are Western states that I could name now that I know are against this. How do we get something out of Vilnius that is not just a statement of we will keep working on Ukraine's membership? How can you convince those countries in the west of the alliance that are nervous that making Ukraine a member would be provocative?
Yes, I would like to underline one very, very important element. I don't know you remember what I said yesterday during our debate with Jens Stoltenberg and Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine and Deputy Prime Minister of Canada and the Director of American Intelligence. Yes, I said that that was a secret, but not confidential officially, but the secret of the meeting. Yes. 7 days ago, we had a meeting in Lviv with Volodymyr Zelensky and Gitanas Nauseda. And we call this political format, Lublin Triangle. We had a meeting and we discussed our schedules for 2023. And among all those important moments, there was one most important. This is NATO Summit in Vilnius. Gitanas Nauseda, as a host of the summit, as the president of the country, hosting all the members of the NATO in July, and we started to
to assure Volodymyr Zelensky. Volodymyr, of course, there will be the invitation for you for that summit. Volodymyr said, okay, but guys, you know, I can understand and I appreciate that that you will repeat that the path to NATO is still open. The doors of NATO are open for Ukraine, and that in the future we probably achieve the membership of the NATO. I can understand that now it's impossible because there is Article 5 and we have war in our country, so this is completely understandable that this is practically impossible now to join NATO, to have this full membership now. But you know, but I don't want to hear again that the doors to NATO are open, etc., 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 because it's the same all the time, the same. And I am in a very, very difficult situation now, and if I want something from NATO now, I need guarantees. I need guarantees, security guarantees from NATO. So if you can try to talk with your partners in NATO about this idea, to give Ukraine these guarantees, to make this decision in July, I will be very grateful, he said. You know, yesterday I said it to said this story to Jens Stoltenberg here publicly. He, as you know, didn't understand. They didn't answer, but he said that we will talk about it and we will try to convince our partners to find some way to give this security guarantees for Ukraine. And my question is, what do you think about it? You as very experienced members of the political NATO structures, representatives of the NATO member countries, yes, who are every day here, there in Brussels, who discuss all those very, very, very important topics with all the representatives of the member countries. What do you think about it? Is it possible? Do you see any possible path to achieve this goal? What's your opinion?
Let me try. This is a very sensitive question among the allies, and let me be honest. I think I'm skeptical in this. I'm much more skeptical in this than we would find some way that would begin something as the EU has already done. That it provided, I would say, a very relevant, credible perspective for Ukraine and the EU. Because one of the messages that the Ukraine really needs and wants is, of course, we are not going to enlarge by Ukraine tomorrow, and as you rightly said, not during the war. But what Ukraine needs to, what Ukraine needs to see is that we have started to discuss it, the way that one day eventually will end with the membership. And it's not that only like, the door remains open. This is nothing. We need to find a process that would lead. The EU managed to do it somehow. I mean, and when people ask me why, I mean, I already mentioned it in the beginning. We need to look at it strategically. If we agree, but that's my assumption, the best scenario for the Ukrainian war, regardless whether Ukraine wins the war or not, is that there will be a new Cold War. And there's a question where the wall will be built, whether it will be built on the current NATO borders, or whether the wall will be built on the border of Ukraine. So basically, whether Ukraine will be in or out. let's be selfish. When the allies are discussing, they always say, NATO is about our security, our collective defense. Then let's look at those two scenarios. If we enlarge by Ukraine, then we would have the wall built, and let's assume that we are much stronger than Russia, and Russia would really think twice, maybe 3 times before they start to attack us, and maybe to test our own security. There will be much more stability in the Cold War. If we leave Ukraine outside the wall, it will create a belt of instability. Even if Ukraine wins this war, Russia will never admit. I mean, they can attack again and again. There might be smaller conflicts, there might be a large-scale conflict, but the result for our own security will be there always will be instability. There always will be kind of war or conflict just at our border. If we want to have stable security environment for the future, we need to have Ukraine. And Yuri already mentioned it, and I would use his answer to answer your question. If we even provide some guarantees to Ukraine, it will not be Article 5-like, because I don't think it is possible to have something that would be similar to NATO. Ukraine will only be, I mean, their development will only be hampered. They will not have the real security guarantees of Article 5 as NATO is providing. It will be some sort of guarantees, and this will. I don't think this will work for even the middle term perspective.
Is it not? Sorry, is it not an easy way to, as the president said, to get some of these less open countries to agree by going step by step? First, security guarantees. 5 years go by, there's no attack. France doesn't have to go to war with Russia or any other country. Just use France example. And after 5 years, the French go, well, okay, fine, maybe we'll take them in. Like it's. I mean, if we're giving security guarantees to Sweden and Finland, why not Ukraine, right? I mean, there are stopgap guarantees that have been given to Stockholm and Helsinki, and to give Erdogan time to have his election. Why not do the same for Ukraine?
Yeah, I don't prescribe to that strategy that let's sort of let 5 years to go by. I mean, when the war ends, we should move very quickly. That's why I believe that now is the time to create the political environment so that everybody knows that as soon as the war ends, Ukraine will be NATO. But it's almost inevitable at some point. So I think that's the best we can do. We don't know what happens in 5 years or so if Ukraine will be out. Because let's be honest, nobody will provide Ukraine bilateral security guarantees. Nobody. Big countries don't want to call them security guarantees.
Well, we did that before, and then we broke them all.
Even using the word security guarantees, people don't want to use them. They are ready to use the word commitment. They are ready to use the word assurance. But the problem is that assurance comes from the Budapest Memorandum. So it doesn't sound really very, very credible. But no guarantees. And one of the reasons of that is that NATO provides a collective guarantee of 30 nations. Nations which, okay, some of them small, some of them big, can provide both political, economic, and military muscle, including the extended nuclear deterrent. But that is something which has guaranteed that no NATO country has ever been attacked, with the exception of the United States. But this is in some ways a different story. And so in a way, for me, NATO is an instrument of peace. I mean, it's perhaps one of the strongest instruments of peace. And we shouldn't allow, Putin speaks so much about NATO being aggressive that somehow some people kind of take it over and kind of nonchalantly use the same language. Of course, NATO is, it doesn't sound good, and many countries don't like it, stuff like that. We shouldn't take over that vocabulary.
I think I should also address this question, since my president asked, it would be inappropriate if I didn't try at least. I actually believe that some sort of security security guarantees as a temporary solution, but not an alternative to NATO membership, could be useful. But what's most important indeed is the Ukrainian path to NATO membership, and we have to recognize that we are in a different situation since the autumn, because in September Ukraine submitted a written application. I'm actually surprised they didn't do it earlier, but eventually they did it. So now it's a time of a test to our slogans that we repeat each summit, that we keep our doors open and Ukraine will become a NATO member. And there are also other political considerations. You have mentioned them. There should be strategic cost to Putin. Peter has mentioned that it will be just in our interest to have Ukraine among us. Nobody believes that this is an actual option to have Ukraine in NATO before the war ends. Yeah. Of course, we will understand. We have to make sure Ukraine gets weapons and everything. But there's all sorts of ideas. I mean, it's only up to the political creativity for us to to answer in a respectful way. I mean, Peter is always often saying in an Ukrainian request deserves a respectful answer. We cannot dodge Ukrainian plea for NATO membership, and there's lots of solutions politically we can adapt by the Vilnius Summit that should satisfy Ukraine in terms of the political signal, and will not be escalatory and will not bring NATO to immediate war with Russia.
The elephant in the room here, of course, is Putin. If Russia loses the war, which it looks more likely than not at the moment, that could be the end of Putin, which does change the dynamic, right? Or does it not? Is Russia always going to be Russia?
I'm getting this question quite often.
Oh, I thought it was a good one.
By my friends, and without giving you any complex answer, I would just say, just imagine Putin is not there. There is a new ruler. And he would be a democratic one. He would decide to withdraw forces from Moldova. He would decide to withdraw forces from Georgia. He would say that he respects sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. If there are some forces in Crimea, even if there was some peace agreement with Ukraine, still confirming that some Russian forces may remain in Crimea, he would say, we even withdraw our forces from Crimea. For how long can he survive politically? Those who think that the new ruler of Russia will be a democratic one and everything will be perfect, we will have reset number 155 or so, that everything will be good. No. When people, even in my country, they say, finally, the people on social media, they stood up and they are against the regime. Yes, that's true, because they call for more actions. They call to kill all Ukrainians. It's not like in our societies that people are against the government because they criticize them, that you are going too far. That's just the opposite. That's why, people know me. I'm usually optimist, but this is as optimistic as it gets. That's why when we speak about the future of relations with Russia, what relations between NATO and Russia should be. There's for the upcoming 10 years, it's only bad and worse, I think, and we have to be ready for that. If someone says it's too early to discuss this, it's too early to set a strategy, we already know the basic nature of the relations. We just need to know whether it will be bad or really bad. But we definitely need to prepare for the really bad.
Is NATO preparing for the really bad?
Well, we are doing our best, of course, as we have discussed here. For a small country like Estonia, next to Russia's borders, we often ask the same question. Are they always going to be Russia, or will there be some changes? As Democrats, as people who believe in sort of human soul, if you will, you would automatically think that, yeah, they can change. There can be real democracy, etc., etc. But the fact is that it doesn't seem likely at all. Whom can you blame for it? As you know, there are different theories. But I think the essential part is that the Russian intellectual class has never tried actual, profound, enlightened changes, which will bring it close to Europe. At every turn, and Russian history has provided some twists and turns, as you know, at every turn they have finally selected closeness, a close country, a xenophobic country, and of course that a country being close to the outside world, it gives birth to this kind of stereotypic attitude, and it's so very common in Russia. I mean, look at people who leave Russia. Look at the people who escape mobilization, or even some, unfortunately, some democratically minded Russians. Very few of them are against the war. Even less of them say it openly that they are against the war or come to the streets. They could easily demonstrate in the West. I mean, there's nothing to be afraid of. They don't do that at all. So this is a major problem. And let's be honest. I mean, the guy who picked Putin, was actually Boris Yeltsin, who was probably one of the most democratic leaders in Russia. But he picked Putin because he never changed Russia's attitude towards KGB, FSB. Never did Russian people discuss the true nature of KGB, FSB, and this provided a fertile ground to say, we need a nice, practical, hands-on, reliable guy. Let's pick Putin, which, of course, as we see now, is a tragedy.
Do you have a response to that one, Tomasz? I think the front row wants to ask a question.
Okay, just one comment and one question with regard to the Budapest Memorandum. I mean, all this criticism with regard to this memorandum basically also undermines a bit of our trust towards US and the United Kingdom. So let's be fair and let's be accurate. There were no security guarantees for Ukraine in Budapest Memorandum by any means comparable with Article 5. There is only one country which has broken the rules of Budapest Memorandum, is Russia, because the Budapest Memorandum said that all those countries will refrain from attacking the Ukraine. So, as far as I know, it is not US or UK attacking Ukraine right now. So let's not somehow mix two different things. So that's my first comment. The second. When it comes to, I mean, Henry, you started by kicking off this panel. You started with an opinion that we were right on the eastern flank. That's, I would say, the matter of fact rather than the opinion. Yes, basically, we were right about Russia as an aggressive international actor. We were right about the need of Euro-Atlantic cooperation. And we are also right in criticizing one concept which was very actively discussed throughout the last couple of years, which is the strategic autonomy. The strategic autonomy, the concept of several Western European countries saying that basically we should build our European security by ourselves, without direct engagement of US. It was understood on the eastern flank basically as, I don't know, cutting the links with the US. I would say that the last 10 months has proven that there is absolutely no security, Euro-Atlantic security, but without Euro-Atlantic cooperation, without direct engagement of the US when it comes to the defense industry, when it comes to the rapid response to all those challenges we've faced. So my question to the panelists would be, where are we now in Brussels when it comes to this discussion about the strategic autonomy? Where are those, and what they say, those who are in favor of this concept? Thank you.
It's quite surprising where we are. But before I start, let me just, joining colleagues with this previous question. This truth is slowly sinking in, and I believe we are on the right track with the defense adaptation by the Vilnius, which is the right response to the Russia question in the long term. But when it comes to NATO and the EU, on one hand, we all understand that NATO is the only provider of the deterrence and defense, of a serious deterrence and defense, and the EU cannot match it in these terms. On the other side, on the other hand, we are facing a situation where we see an enormous expansion of European Union competences when it comes to defense, because NATO is not stepping in terms of coordinating the assistance to Ukraine. So hence you are seeing you basically directly financing
the EPF, yeah.
arms deliveries to Ukraine. The EU setting up a training mission in Poland and also in Germany, which is training the something that for which there was no consensus within the alliance. So on one hand, this
is that true?
Yeah.
There was supposed to be a NATO training mission, but it wasn't.
No, there wasn't supposed to be, but there is no training.
We haven't gone that far.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, okay. I mean, you can compare. I mean, there's EU training mission. There's no NATO training mission.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so basically, you can draw conclusions out of that. Yeah. So my suspicion is that some countries that wanted to expand expand the EU defense sort of or were behind strategic autonomy are now expanding the EU, because I mean, when it comes to the assistance to Ukraine, which is actually a very good case. I mean, this is very good that the EU is doing that. The negative of that is that NATO may be losing on its relevance in these important issues.
What do you guys think? Has Macron stopped talking about strategic autonomy as much?
I think when Finland and Sweden applied for NATO membership, the real debate on strategic autonomy was over. If one of two most militarily powerful states in the EU say that we believe only in Article 5 security guarantees, which means basically we do not see the EU as a security provider in terms of Article 5. I mean, how can you respond to this argument, even those who would be still dreaming of the autonomy, whatever it was meant to be? I mean, they were so negatively surprised. Basically, this was the end of the debate.
Absolutely.
And as Tomasz said, now the EU is doing it quite wisely, because now they are filling the empty space, empty room that we as NATO are leaving. And I hope that the books, the history books, will be very polite and very kind to us, to NATO, because when we look what NATO has done since the beginning of the conflict, and we know the reasons, we can explain it, but when you read it in the book, and you will see the EU set up the peace mechanism. The EU is reimbursing. The EU is collecting money for providing lethal support to Ukraine. The EU is now training. EU is training soldiers with almost no structures. I mean, the US have always been telling us, don't invest in structures, invest in capabilities. Now the EU has the capabilities even without the structures, and this is everything just because NATO has left the room empty for someone and wise people there, who still somehow feed at least part of the idea of the strategic autonomy. Training mission. Let's do something, step by step. And I don't think we are right in NATO not doing many things that we could do.
We're almost out of time, so I'm going to ask one very quick fire final question. Will the summit in Vilnius also involve a change of Secretary General? Okay, that's a no comment.
I mean, it's really impossible to say. What I can say is, and I try to throw the ball back to the president. NATO Secretary General is never selected at our level. It always formally. Yeah. No.
Well, she's protecting his office.
Really not.
I'm afraid Madam Stoltenberg should answer.
Well, that's one aspect, but it will be selected on the heads of state level. Usually, it's assumed that it is a somebody who is from the same circle, head of state, head of government. But the experience with European Union has shown, like Ursula von der Leyen, who is, I think, an excellent president of the European Commission, that in the end, you don't know who this person will be, at what level, with what experience. It very much depends on the political consensus.
Let me answer by, sorry, my son is very fond of mathematics. And he one day he approached me and said, you know, he posed me a question, how big is the chance that you can win a lottery? And I said, hey, I cannot calculate. And he said, 50%, you either win or not. So that's my answer to your question, basically.
Very good. Thank you very much. This was fantastic. Great to chat. Tomasz, Peter, and Yuri. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to the President for his contributions.